In the early years of the Second World War, Otto Skorzeny was not famous. He was not decorated. He was not feared. While Germany's armored divisions rolled through Poland and France, and Luftwaffe pilots became household names, Skorzeny remained buried deep inside the vast machinery of the SS, a tall, scar-faced engineer with ambition far greater than his rank. History would later remember him as Hitler's favorite commando. But in 1939, Otto Skorzeny was, in the eyes of the Nazi hierarchy, expendable. What followed was not a story of instant recognition, but of ruthless self-promotion, political instinct, and a dangerous understanding of how power truly functioned inside the Third Reich. A war that did not need him yet. When war erupted in September 1939, Skorzeny was already in his early 30s, older than many frontline officers. Despite his physical stature and ideological reliability, he was not selected for elite combat roles. Instead, Skorzeny found himself assigned to technical and administrative SS units, overseeing engineering and logistics functions far from the front lines. To a man who believed war was the ultimate proving ground, this was humiliation. The Waffen-SS glorified battlefield heroism, but Skorzeny understood something many did not. In Nazi Germany, visibility mattered more than merit. The politics of the SS. The SS was not a single organization. It was a nest of rival empires. Heinrich Himmler ruled it in theory, but power was fractured among the Waffen-SS combat units, the Sicherheitsdienst intelligence, the Gestapo, technical and industrial divisions. Promotion depended not on bravery alone, but on personal sponsorship. Skorzeny lacked a patron, yet he watched carefully. He observed how men rose, not by waiting for orders, but by creating relevance. Skorzeny's opportunity, Hitler's obsession. Adolf Hitler was fascinated by unconventional warfare. He admired surprise attacks, psychological shock, symbolic victories. British commandos raiding the Norwegian coast and North Africa deeply unsettled him. The idea that small elite units could achieve what armies could not captured his imagination. Hitler demanded his own version. The problem was this: Germany had no doctrine for special operations, and into that vacuum stepped Otto Skorzeny, inventing a role that did not exist. Skorzeny began submitting unsolicited memoranda. They were bold. They were dangerous. And they went far beyond his authority. He proposed independent commando formations, airborne sabotage units, enemy language-trained soldiers, operations behind enemy lines. Most officers would have been punished for such insubordination. But Skorzeny's proposals landed at the right moment, when German momentum was slowing, and Hitler was increasingly receptive to desperate innovation. A man willing to fail publicly. In 1941 and 1942, Skorzeny pushed for experimental training programs. He requested mountain warfare training, parachute qualifications, close-quarters combat instruction. His first operational deployments were unremarkable, and some failed outright. But failure did not deter him. Unlike traditional officers, Skorzeny did not fear embarrassment. He understood something essential. In the Third Reich, audacity was rewarded, even when competence was not yet proven. The Eastern Front, a brutal education. Skorzeny eventually saw frontline service on the Eastern Front. There, the war stripped away all illusion. The fighting was merciless. The rules were non-existent. Survival depended on adaptability. It was here that Skorzeny absorbed the harsh logic that would define him. Speed over caution, shock over attrition, terror as a weapon. He was wounded in combat, his body bearing the cost of war, his reputation slowly hardening. Enter the Führer's radar. By 1942, Skorzeny's name had begun circulating in elite circles, not as a hero, but as a problem solver. He was summoned to brief higher SS leadership on commando tactics. Then unexpectedly, his ideas reached Hitler himself. The dictator was intrigued. Here was an officer who spoke not of defense, but of spectacle. Hitler's commando philosophy. Hitler believed war was theater. Victories had to be dramatic. They had to restore faith. They had to humiliate enemies. Skorzeny understood this instinct perfectly. He did not promise strategic reversals. He promised symbols. And Hitler approved. A unit is born. In 1943, Skorzeny was authorized to form a special operations training unit within the Waffen-SS. It was small, it was experimental, and it answered directly upward, bypassing traditional command structures. Freedom. The cult of the Commando. Skorzeny trained his men differently. He demanded absolute loyalty, initiative over obedience, psychological dominance. He taught them that uniforms were tools, not identities. Enemy language skills were mandatory. Deception was encouraged. Rules were optional. This philosophy would soon horrify the Allies. A war turning against Germany. By mid-1943, the tide had shifted. Stalingrad was lost. North Africa was collapsing. Italy was wavering. Hitler needed a victory, any victory, to restore momentum. And fate delivered Skorzeny the perfect opportunity, foreshadowing Gran Sasso. In July 1943, Benito Mussolini was overthrown by his own government. He vanished into Allied custody. To Hitler, this was betrayal. To Skorzeny, it was destiny. Because at that moment, unknown to most of the world, the most daring commando operation of the war was being conceived. And Otto Skorzeny was about to step onto the stage of history. Operation Oak, the rescue of Mussolini. By the summer of 1943, Nazi Germany was losing the war. Stalingrad had shattered the myth of invincibility. Allied bombers roamed the skies. And now Italy, Germany's oldest Axis partner, was collapsing from within. On July 25, 1943, Benito Mussolini, the man who had ruled Italy for more than 2 decades, was arrested by order of his own king. To Adolf Hitler, this was not merely a political setback. It was treason. And in Hitler's mind, betrayal demanded spectacle, not negotiation. Mussolini disappears. After his arrest, Mussolini vanished. The new Italian government moved him constantly. Naval bases, remote islands, mountain fortresses. The Allies feared a German rescue attempt. The Germans feared an Allied trial, or worse, Mussolini defecting publicly. For Hitler, Mussolini was no longer just an ally. He was a symbol, and symbols had to be reclaimed. Hitler's order. Hitler issued a direct command. Find Mussolini. Rescue him. At any cost. This was not assigned to the Wehrmacht. It was not assigned to the Luftwaffe. It was handed to the SS, and within the SS it landed in the hands of Otto Skorzeny. The race to find Il Duce. German intelligence scoured Italy. Radio intercepts. Informants. Aerial reconnaissance. Skorzeny personally led search teams, often ignoring orders, duplicating efforts, and antagonizing rival intelligence branches. He followed rumors others dismissed. Finally, a break. Mussolini was being held at a remote hotel atop the Gran Sasso mountain range, the Hotel Campo Imperatore. Altitude over 6,500 feet. Access a single cable car. Guards Italian Carabinieri. Defenses minimal, but the terrain was lethal. The problem no one wanted. The location was nearly impossible. No road access. Steep cliffs, thin air, limited landing zones. A conventional assault would fail. Parachuting was impossible. Helicopters were unreliable at altitude. Ground assault would alert guards. Someone suggested gliders. Most officers laughed. Skorzeny did not. The operation, codenamed Operation Oak, was audacious. The plan called for DFS-230 gliders, towed by aircraft, released above Gran Sasso, landing directly beside the hotel. No rehearsal site replicated the terrain. If the gliders crashed, everyone would die. Skorzeny insisted on leading the mission himself. Official command of the mission belonged to Major Harold Moores of the Fallschirmjäger. Skorzeny was technically a subordinate. In practice, Skorzeny dominated planning and later history. This tension would matter later when credit was assigned. September 12, 1943, launch day. The morning air was thin. At a remote airfield, gliders were hitched to tow planes. Inside one glider sat Skorzeny, armed with a submachine gun and absolute confidence. No second chances. No extraction plan if things went wrong. Landing under death's shadow. The landing zone was smaller than expected. Several gliders slammed into rocks. One nearly went over a cliff. But miraculously, most landed intact. Skorzeny leapt out immediately. Time mattered. The Italian guards were stunned. No warning, no gunfire. Skorzeny shouted orders, some in Italian. Most guards froze. Not a single shot was fired. The psychological shock worked exactly as planned. Finding Mussolini. Inside the hotel, Mussolini waited. Weak, ill, resigned. Skorzeny burst into the room. He saluted. Duce, the Führer has sent me. You are free. Mussolini reportedly wept. Extraction the most dangerous moment. Rescuing Mussolini was only half the mission. Getting him out was worse. A Fieseler Storch liaison aircraft was to land on a sloped plateau, barely large enough to walk across. It was overloaded. Skorzeny insisted on flying with Mussolini, despite weight limits. The pilot protested. Skorzeny overruled him. Take off against physics. The plane lurched forward. The cliff edge rushed closer. For a moment it seemed impossible. Then air. The Storch cleared the cliff by meters. Against all odds, they were airborne. Within hours, Nazi media exploded. Photographs of Skorzeny beside Mussolini were everywhere. Hitler was ecstatic. Skorzeny was promoted, decorated, immortalized. The truth behind the legend. But history is complicated. Major Morse's ground troops secured the cable car. Luftwaffe pilots took enormous risks. Italian guards chose not to resist. Skorzeny was not alone, yet propaganda crowned him the hero. He was Hitler's commando, the man who could do the impossible. And the war, desperate, collapsing, and violent, would soon demand even darker missions.